The killer left behind his DNA, his fingerprints, his blood, his clothes. He even stayed inside the house for hours after murdering an entire family. Police believed the case would be solved within days. 25 years later, they still don't know who he is. On the night of December 30th, 2000, in the quiet residential neighborhood of Kamisoshigaya, Setagaya, Tokyo, a family of 4 was brutally murdered inside their own home. But what turned this case into one of Japan's greatest unsolved mysteries wasn't just the brutality of the murders, it was what the killer did. Afterward, instead of fleeing the scene, he remained inside the house for hours. He opened the family's freezer and ate their ice cream. He used their computer to browse the internet. He changed his clothes, treated his own injuries, and eventually walked away as if there had never been any urgency to escape. Even more astonishing, he left behind nearly every piece of evidence a murderer would normally try to erase. His fingerprints, his DNA, his blood, his clothing, his footprints, and thousands of other forensic clues. With that amount of evidence, investigators believed identifying the killer would only be a matter of time. But more than 25 years later, that man has never been identified. This is the story of the Setagaya Family Murders, a case that became more baffling with every new discovery, and one that remains one of the most perplexing cold cases in the history of Japanese crime. Hello everyone, and welcome to World True Crime Vault. In today's video, we'll take a deep dive into the complete timeline of the case, examine the crucial evidence the killer left behind, and explore the theories that have puzzled investigators for more than 2 decades. Most importantly, we'll try to answer one haunting question: how could a murderer leave behind so much evidence and still disappear without a trace? If you enjoy detailed, fact-based true crime stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our future investigations into some of the world's most fascinating unsolved cases. To the people around them, the Miyazawa family seemed to have an ordinary, happy life. Mikio Miyazawa, 44, worked for a design company. Friends and neighbors described him as a quiet, hard-working man devoted to his family. His wife, Yasuko, 41, was a caring mother who spent most of her time raising their 2 young children. Their daughter, Nina, was just 8 years old, while their son, Ray, had recently turned 6. Like countless other families across Japan, they were looking forward to celebrating the new year together. On the evening of December 30th, 2000, the family went shopping near Kyoto's Karasaswama station, enjoyed dinner together, and spent the rest of the night relaxing at home, watching television. It was an ordinary winter evening, no arguments, no signs of danger. Nothing to suggest that, within a matter of hours, every member of the Miyazawa family would be dead. At approximately 11:30 p.m., as the quiet neighborhood had settled in for the night, a stranger silently approached the Miyazawa family's home. He climbed over the backyard fence, stepped onto an outdoor air conditioning unit, and entered the house through the second-floor bathroom window. The first victim was Ray, the family's 6-year-old son, who was asleep in his bedroom. The unusual noise quickly drew Mikio Miyazawa upstairs to investigate. There, he came face to face with the intruder. A violent struggle followed, leaving behind clear evidence of a fierce confrontation. Investigators later determined that the killer had used a high-end Yanaji Aseki Magaroku Ginju sashimi knife, but the blade broke during the attack. The killer then went downstairs, took a Santoku kitchen knife from the Miyazawa family's own kitchen, and returned upstairs. Moments later, Yasuko and the couple's 8-year-old daughter, Nina, also became victims. In just a matter of minutes, every member of the Miyazawa family had lost their lives inside the home they should have been safest in. In almost every murder case, This is the moment when the killer does everything possible to escape. But in this case, the exact opposite happened. According to investigators, the killer remained inside the house for several more hours after the murders. During that time, he opened the family's freezer, ate 4 ice cream bars, ate some melon, and drank 4 bottles of barley tea. Computer records also revealed that between 1:18 a.m. and 1:23 a.m., Mikio's computer was powered on. Someone accessed the internet, unsuccessfully attempted to purchase tickets for a theater performance, created a new folder, and then shut the computer down. Every action suggested an extraordinary level of calm, as though the killer had no concern whatsoever about being discovered. At around 10:30 the following morning, Haruko, Yusuko's mother, arrived to visit the family as she normally did. As soon as she arrived, she noticed that the telephone line had been cut. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, she entered the house. What she found inside left her in shock. She immediately called the police. Within minutes, what had once been a peaceful family home became the scene of one of the most baffling unsolved murder cases in Japanese history. This is where the case takes an extraordinary turn. As investigators processed the crime scene, they quickly realized that the killer hadn't left behind just a few traces. He had seemingly abandoned almost everything that could identify him. Scattered throughout the house were pieces of clothing and personal belongings believed to belong to the killer: a gray Crusher hat, a black Uniqlo jacket, a red and blue plaid scarf, a pair of black leather gloves, and most notably, a long-sleeved sweatshirt with a gray body and purple sleeves. Investigators discovered that this particular sweatshirt was extremely rare. Only about 130 had ever been manufactured, and just 10 were sold in the Tokyo area. For years, police tracked down the owners of nearly every one of them, hoping to identify the person who owned the remaining sweatshirt. The shoes the killer wore were just as unusual. They were Schlesinger sneakers, size 27.5 centimeters, manufactured in South Korea and never officially sold in Japan. A gray waist bag provided investigators with even more unexpected clues. Inside, they were covered to strands of the killer's hair, grains of sand traced to the Mojave Desert near Edwards Air Force Base in California, and traces of a red fluorescent powder. Each new discovery opened another possible lead. DNA testing revealed that the killer had type of blood. Genetic analysis also suggested that his paternal lineage belonged to haplogroup OM1-2, which is commonly found in East Asian populations such as China and Korea, while his maternal lineage belonged to haplogroup H15, a much rarer lineage more frequently associated with Southern Europe. Based on all of the available evidence, investigators estimated that the killer was approximately 170 centimeters tall, had a slim build, and was likely between 15 and 22 years old at the time of the murders. His fingerprints were found throughout the house, yet, when they were compared against criminal databases in Japan and abroad, investigators found no matches. Forensic examiners also detected the scent of Drakkar, nor cologne on the cloth that had been used during the crime. Investigators further concluded that the killer had likely injured himself during the struggle. The biological evidence he left behind ultimately became one of the most valuable sources of DNA in the entire investigation. By this point, detectives could hardly believe what they were seeing. It is rare for a murderer to leave behind this much evidence. Everything seemed to suggest that they were only days or perhaps weeks away from identifying the killer. Instead, the Setagaya Family Murders would become one of the most baffling unsolved cases in modern Japanese history. Immediately after the murders, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police department established a special investigative task force led by Takeshi Tsukida. What followed became one of the largest and most exhaustive murder investigations in Japanese history. Hundreds of thousands of officers, investigators, and support personnel worked tirelessly to examine every lead, every witness statement, and every piece of physical evidence in the hope of identifying the killer. One of the most ambitious efforts was a large-scale fingerprint campaign known as Roller Operation. Detectives systematically collected and compared fingerprints from residents throughout the surrounding area, searching for even a single match. The investigation also quickly expanded beyond Japan's borders. Authorities worked closely with Interpol, South Korean law enforcement, and other international agencies to pursue every possible lead. As forensic technology advanced, the investigation evolved with it. In 2008, police publicly released the results of their YSTR DNA analysis, providing new insight into the suspect's paternal ancestry. In 2021, investigators used 3D reconstruction technology to recreate the crime scene, hoping that a fresh perspective and modern forensic techniques might reveal details that had been overlooked years earlier. Even after more than 2 decades, the case has never been closed. As recently as 2025, Tokyo police continue distributing flyers, appealing to the public for information, and maintaining a 20 million yen reward for tips leading to the killer's identification. And yet, not a single fingerprint has been matched. Not a single DNA sample has led investigators to the killer's identity. Not one suspect has ever been charged. What makes this case so extraordinary is that, despite possessing the kind of forensic evidence most homicide investigators could only dream of, Japanese police still cannot answer the one question that matters most: who murdered the Miyazawa family? With the overwhelming amount of evidence collected from the crime scene, many investigators believed it would only be a matter of time before the killer was identified. But weeks passed, then months, eventually years. Every fingerprint was compared. Every DNA sample was analyzed. Every item the killer left behind was traced back to its origin. Yet every path led to the same conclusion: no match, no name, no suspect. When the physical evidence failed to answer the question of who the killer was, investigators were forced to approach the case from a different angle. Instead of asking who did it, they began asking a different question: what kind of person could have done this? From that point on, several theories began to emerge. Some were built on forensic evidence, others came from investigative journalists, and a few were fueled by public speculation. To this day, none of them has ever been proven, but each one offers a different perspective on why this case has remained unsolved for more than 25 years. The first theory brought investigators back to the park, located directly behind the Miyazawa family's home. According to several reports, Mikio Miyazawa had complained on multiple occasions about the noise coming from the nearby skateboard park before the murders. Some accounts even claimed that he had argued with teenagers who frequently gathered there. If those reports were true, could this tragedy have begun with something as minor as a neighborhood dispute? At first glance, the theory seemed plausible. The killer appeared to be familiar with the neighborhood. He knew how to approach the house from the direction of the park, and he seemed to know exactly how to disappear into the night without attracting attention. But, as the investigation continued, the theory began to fall apart. None of the local teenagers' fingerprints matched those found at the scene. None of their DNA matched either. In the end, investigators found no direct evidence linking any of them to the murders. Another promising lead had reached a dead end. Years later, a completely different theory captured public attention. Investigative journalist Fumiya Ichihashi suggested that the killer might have been a former South Korean serviceman. His theory was based on several unusual pieces of evidence. The killer's shoes had been manufactured in South Korea. DNA analysis indicated that the suspect's paternal lineage belonged to a haplogroup commonly found in East Asia, particularly in China and Korea. Ichihashi also proposed that the murders may have been connected to disputes surrounding the redevelopment of the park behind the Miyazawa family's home. The theory attracted widespread media attention, but to this day, it remains exactly that a theory. No suspect has ever matched the available evidence, no DNA match has ever been found, and no evidence has ever confirmed the motive suggested by Ichihashi. Meanwhile, another theory began spreading across the internet. Some believed the killer may have been the mixed-race child of an American service member who had once lived in Japan. The speculation centered on two particularly unusual discoveries. Inside the killer's waist bag, investigators found sand that was traced to the Mojave Desert, near Edwards Air Force Base in California. DNA analysis also showed that the suspect's maternal lineage belonged to haplogroup H15, a relatively uncommon lineage more frequently associated with Southern Europe. Those two details quickly fueled countless online discussions, but speculation is not evidence. There has never been any proof that the killer served in the U.S. military or had any connection to an American military base. In fact, Tokyo police have never publicly identified a credible lead pointing in that direction. That led investigators to consider another possibility. If the killer was not ethnically Japanese, could he have been of mixed ancestry? Unlike the previous theories, this one was grounded in forensic science. DNA analysis showed that the suspect's paternal lineage belonged to haplogroup OM122, which is common throughout East Asia. His maternal lineage, however, belonged to haplogroup H15, a much rarer lineage more commonly found in Southern Europe. To some experts, this suggested that the killer may have had mixed ancestry, but DNA can only reveal ancestral origins. It cannot determine a person's nationality. It cannot reveal where someone was born, and it certainly cannot reveal someone's identity. To this day, investigators have never confirmed that the killer was of mixed heritage or that he was a foreign national. Finally, there is the simplest theory of all. Perhaps the killer was a complete stranger, someone with no connection to the Miyazawa family, someone with no personal motive, someone who simply chose the wrong house on the wrong night. On the surface, that theory explains why investigators have never uncovered any meaningful connection between the family and a suspect. But it also raises another question. If this was nothing more than a random home invasion, why did the killer remain inside the house for hours? Why did he calmly eat the family's food, use their computer, and leave behind so many of his personal belongings? That is not the behavior investigators typically associate with a random intruder, and perhaps that is exactly why, after more than 25 years, Tokyo police have never committed to a single theory. Every theory once offered hope. Every theory seemed to bring investigators one step closer to the truth. Yet one by one, each of them collapsed under the weight of missing evidence. Perhaps the most disturbing part of the Setagaya family murders is not that the killer disappeared. It is that he left behind almost everything except his identity. More than 25 years have passed since that tragic night. But for the Miyazawa family, the story has never truly come to an end. The Setagaya family murders have become not only one of Japan's most infamous cold cases, but also a case that helped spark public debate over the country's statute of limitations for the most serious crimes. To this day, the investigation remains active. The reward is still being offered, flyers are still being distributed, and the Tokyo Metropolitan Police continue to believe that somewhere, someone knows what happened on the night of December 30th, 2000. Perhaps the truth has remained buried for more than 2 decades. Or perhaps investigators are only one final piece of the puzzle away from uncovering the full story. Which theory do you find the most convincing? Do you believe this was a carefully planned crime, or a series of events that spiraled into an unimaginable tragedy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if there's another cold case you'd like me to cover in a future video, let me know in the comments as well. Thank you for watching World True Crime Vault. I'll see you in the next video.